Hello. So you're probably here because you've plugged in your new keyboard with a mod wheel or Korg Nano Control or some other MIDI controller, wiggled the knobs about and figured out that it doesn't seem to do anything, and you want to know how to attach those pieces of hardware to these things so you can automate them. That's what I'm going to show you today. So before you start, if you go into MIDI settings in options here, you should see your keyboard or controller in this list, otherwise you probably haven't plugged it in or you haven't got the drivers right, something like that. So we're going to start at the point that you've got that right. So Q49 is my keyboard, it's on no port, and it's just a generic controller. And up here I've got a Korg Nano Control 2, which if you click down here you'll probably select that and it will put it on 145 for me. That's port 145. So at that point it should probably work. Sometimes you'll have drivers that you need to install. Do those first, but more importantly, at this point, if you wiggle one of your sliders or your modulation wheel, like I'm doing right now, you should see a little icon in the top left whenever you move it. That means the FL Studio is seeing your MIDI input, and we can actually start doing things with it. So there's a bunch of different types of links that you could use. Global, volatile, and per project. So per project, or simple links as I just call them, you can make them like by doing this. On this clarinet I have dynamics here, so I'm going to wiggle this, or tweak it as it's called. You tweak something just by moving it slightly and it will appear in the top left. So I tweak this once, I tweak the controller, the hardware controller once. I can then click this and tweak that again, and you can see up here it came up with the clarinet has been bound. So now if I move my controller, it's moving with it, and that has been bound just to this clarinet's dynamics. If I go to my violin over here, which is a different instrument, and move it, it doesn't really care. It's still moving the clarinet's one, because it's just bound the one controller to the one thing in one channel. These won't persist if you change save file. It's just for this project right here. So that's what a simple or per project link is. You can do as many of those as you want. So if I wanted to bind this one to a different controller, I'd tweak it, click that, and so I've done this in the wrong order. You're going to tweak both the controller and the parameter, then click this, then tweak that, because it basically this cares about the last two things that you tweaked. So now I've got both of these set up, and I can tweak them both at once if I want, and they're both set up so that it will always be bound just to these controls, to this clarinet. So those are great. Those are great if you want to change something odd like the tightness or some property that isn't common across all instruments. Like vibrato, you might not have vibrato on a drum, for example, so you might want to have a different property that you'd bind to here. So those are really useful for specific controls. If you want to make generic controls, which are controls that will work across all of your instruments and you don't have to keep changing them, those are called global or generic links. So what I'm going to do right now is clear the two per project links. The tick here means that something is bound to the last thing I controlled, so I'm going to click that to open up the settings for it and reset. So now if I move them both, you can see the right one isn't moving anymore, and if I just tweak this one again, and so now it's reading into the one I just tweaked, link the controller, reset. Now both of my controls are disabled. I'm moving the sliders and nothing is happening. So I'm now going to attach generic links to these. So for example, if you always want your slider on number 1 to be attached to the dynamics here or there, this is how you do it. You tweak this, you tweak your slider, you right click here, override generic link, and then tweak your slider again. So now that's moving this one, but if I move to violin, it's moving it in the violin patch. So now this control matters only to the thing I have selected here. And that's pretty great because it means we can set up a few controls that are generic across anything. All we have to do is select what we're using and we can change the control. So you could just go straight into the clarinet and change that and then switch over to violin. And it's already working easily. These are the most useful type of links, I find. And again, just to set up another one, I'm going to tweak this, tweak the second control, right-click, override generic link, tweak the second control again, and now both of these are working on whichever one we have selected. So that's per project and global links. Now I'm going to set up a volatile link. Now these are the most handy, but not always convenient. If you have a keyboard with a mod wheel, it's likely that the mod wheel is already set up to be a volatile link. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to get rid of those two previous controls just to keep everything clean. I'm going to set up the first control to be a volatile link. So I'm going to tweak it and click, the volatile link setting is down here. And you see it's bound to the dynamics here. If I tweak this now just with my mouse, then it will change that when I move this slider. If I click this again, the same slider will change something else. This works for any instrument, anywhere. So a keyboard mod wheel, most likely you want to keep that on volatile because it means you can just change anything by twiggling it for a second and then you have your dynamics ready at hand. This one also works for Kontakt. So here I've got dynamics. If I just wiggle that for a sec, that works here for my vibrato. I've got that going.